here before know I normally come out to something real D-boyish. Clips, Pusha T, Jay. But life is always lifing, and I really want y'all to be in a soft space this evening, not just because of my amazing guest, but, you know, sometimes you lose touch with people, and it could be, social media tricks us into thinking we stayed in touch. So it could be years into think, you know, you haven't talked to them, and yesterday I got a message from an old friend's mom that she had passed, and we're too young to be losing people, but cancer is a killer that we haven't figured out yet. And I really just wanted to play before I let you go, because I know you all typically come here with somebody. So I wanted you to just turn to that person. And if you didn't come with someone, turn to someone anyway, and just tell them that they are joy, and they are love, and you woke up today. 1, 2, 3. So this type of affirmation is literally why I created A Beautiful Resistance. I created A Beautiful Resistance because I wanted Black people in particular, but also other folks of color, marginalized people, anyone who's ever felt unseen, to be affirmed and to know that they matter and that joy is an important tool of the revolution. So I created A Beautiful Resistance in summer 2020. And here we are, 4 years later, still doing the thing with the Boston Globe and the Museum of Science now. Typically, an episode consists of a short film, a Q&A, a long-form story, some music, because we always got to do our Zaza. Thank you, Real P. And right now, I'm going to kick it over to a never-seen-before episode of the upcoming season 3. So stay tuned to bostonglobe.com/A Beautiful Resistance, Instagram.com/A Beautiful Resistance. We got hand flyers over here with QR codes. Sign up to our newsletter. Hey, Jackie, hey. Everybody say, hey, Jackie. Hey, Jackie. So enjoy this episode, and I'll see you shortly. What do you want the legacy of Allison Feaster to be?
I know I didn't get here alone. Not by any means. And so if I can pour into young women, young girls, that to me is what I want my legacy to be about. Every chance I get, and my time is limited now, but I love engaging with young professionals or students who want to understand what I do. I believe in pouring into my colleagues because I know I am super privileged to have the platform I have and the position. And I don't want to minimize their work. I want to uplift and appreciate their work. And so that's what I want my legacy to be about service to others. Hey, Jeneé.
We are at the AC with you. Tell us a little bit where we are.
We are at the Celtics practice facility when we're in season and not at the Garden playing games. We're here practicing, and our front offices are up there as well. Our players, it's kind of their sanctuary, their refuge to come and work on themselves, their parts of the game that they want to improve on. And it's also a connection point for our staff to convene.
You were a forward. Versatile, strong across the board, doing some of everything on the court to advance the team.
Right.
Which I like to think all Black women are forwards in life.
That's a great point. But you can make an argument that many of them are point guards too.
Oh yeah, point guards too.
Point guards, they bear the brunt of
That's true.
direction. And so
I definitely consider myself an Iverson.
you are a multi-hyphenate. You do it all. You do it all.
But how is that like your role as VP of Player Development and Organizational Growth at the Celtics?
It's a passion. It's I wake up every day pinching myself, and I'm lucky that I get to be a cultural ambassador for this brand. I know the guys have all the fun playing the game, but we who work behind the scenes to do what we can to service the organization, it's a joy. It's a real joy.
So when we say player development, what is that in theory? What is that in practice?
I think some of the most successful professional basketball players that we have today, even professional athletes, really focus on areas outside of their craft. They have, refuges, passions they like to pursue. And so we, as a staff, want to be, springboard and connectors to those different resources.
We talked a little bit about some of the social justice initiatives that you and the Celtics are involved in and giving back to small businesses and different mentorship programs. Let's talk a little bit about Raise the Age and some of the other new initiatives that you're helping.
For the first time ever in our organization's history, we came out in support of a piece of legislation that would gradually raise the juvenile justice age in Massachusetts from 18 to 20. It's something we wholeheartedly believe in would make a tremendous impact for, our youth in Massachusetts, specifically youth of color. As we all know, people of color are disproportionately represented in the criminal legal system in this country. Back in, I think it was early October, late September, we held the Play for Justice event here at the Auerbach Center, where our players and front office members sat down with the formerly incarcerated to highlight and to call out the importance of humanizing the formerly incarcerated, but also to hear their stories of how their lives changed drastically due to the early entry into the criminal legal system. I personally have my own, story, my own encounters with the criminal legal system. My younger brother, spent the majority of his 46 years behind bars. And so just understand, firsthand the importance of this legislation. And another thing that came out of, that's coming out of Celtics United is the curbside care mobile clinic that we partnered with Boston Medical Center to provide mothers prenatal, postnatal care so that they can have access to quality health care and to improve the life chances, not only for these mothers, but also for their babies. So very, very important resources for our mothers of color.
Yeah, both of those are vital resources. Both of our brothers my brother's still in and has been in since he was 16 and probably will be 60 when he gets out. And it's startling to think about the number of children who never get a chance to live, who literally are raised in prisons, and how disproportionately those children comprise brown and black youth. So I'm really excited to see the Celtics take a stand that way and hope that we can see a real rallying across the country in different facets that way. And we already know that what the numbers are for Black women and maternal health care and how we are literally dying giving birth. So to see an organization take a stand, to see women like you kind of get involved and help that way.
I want to credit my I have two very amazing colleagues.
Please do, because we're about sharing space.
No,
Name them.
I am the person who is, who has a mic more so than not. But I want to call out Dave Hoffman, who leads our community engagement group. He deserves all the flowers. Mackenzie Henderson and Cash Cannon, who did, the Lions work of that curbside care initiative. They did tremendous work, and so I want to give them their flowers, because it would not have happened, without them.
there's some hard things that happened right after our last interview. We all know about what happened with Ime and how across the internet it became about who the woman was and how we could vilify her. And a lot of different women were thrown out there, but I do feel like you got the brunt of the violent conversations and dehumanizing, hypersexualizing conversations. And one, that's also why I want you to know that, like, we hold you, we see you, we love you. But two, let's talk about what it looks like to support women, especially Black women, when they get into these spotlight positions, when they get into front office, and when they get into leadership.
I'm gonna keep it real. That's a very, that's a painful subject. And I don't want to focus on the pain of it. I will focus on the journey, the growth, and the positivity and the embracing of, the women who are living through it, because it's very real. And not just the women, the people living through it. I think anytime you go through trauma of any sort, you have to take a step, stop, listen, assess, where you are and what you need, around you to kind of get through it. Luckily for me, I am in a wonderful place with wonderful leadership, with wonderful colleagues who came together in a time of extreme adversity, with wonderful players who had to, take the court and go play amidst a crisis. And, I think the hallmark of a strong culture, not a perfect culture, but a strong culture, is the way in which you handle adversity and navigate adversity. And it's a testament to our team, our staff, and everybody, supporting this organization that we've been able to, navigate it together.
How are you taking care of yourself?
Honestly, being a mom for me is one of the most fulfilling roles I've ever played and ever will play. And watching my 17-year-old experience life, experience basketball through her lens, and that to me is the most fulfilling. So in my professional playing career, whenever things weren't going my way in life, I would always turn to her and bask in her light, and that to me was self-care enough.
Are we allowed to talk about the good news for Boston and the Celtics regarding you yet?
Before I even got here, I was meant to be here. The ups and downs, highs and lows of everything that comes with being a professional. But I'm honored to say that I will, continue on for 4 more years with this team. So
I hope you know how much the city loves having you and seeing you and being able to see you, not just in the games at TD, but on TV occasionally they'll flash to you talking to Coach, and it's always like, what are they talking about? What's happening down there? And it's exciting. It makes, I think, a lot of us feel held.
I don't think I imagined the impact of, not me per se, but this position, this role that whoever is in this position plays for young women, young girls, the broader community. So I appreciate that.
I always tell everyone your beautiful resistance can change day to day. I know mine does on certain days. How's living a beautiful resistance today?
I'm just so thankful to have a platform, to love, to give back, and to kind of wrap my arms around people. And so that to me is what a beautiful resistance is about. It's about this connectivity. It's about the celebration. It's about the service of this platform.
Give us one word for this season. What is a word we can leave for this Celtics season for people to ruminate on?
Even better.
Even better. You heard it. Let's go, Celtics. I think we're good. I think we could do our celebration dance.
Let's go.
It's done.
What else? And rain, everybody clap your hands now, Joe.
in her Ford Escort with bass in the back. All of 5 feet tall. She thought she was doing something. All right. How'd you guys like that episode? Since the filming of this episode, I can say like Allison and I have become sister friends, and she is just such a awesome light, and she's also funny as hell. So if you ever get a chance to have a conversation with her, definitely do. I was gonna show a different episode, but I chose this one because of our guests tonight. One, it touches on legislation, the joy and pain of our experience, and it also trolls our next guest, because he a Nick fan, poor baby. I'm so sorry for you. I very much care for this next person. They're one of the, among the first 25 people I met in the city when I moved here in 2018. And also one of the very first big stories I did in the Boston Globe was on Devin and the Teachers Lounge. Devin is the co-founder of Teachers Lounge, and I have watched him over the last few years really build it up, and I can't wait for you to learn more about it. So I'd like to cue up the music and welcome Devin Morris to the stage, repping Brooklyn!
Brooklyn, we go hard. We go hard. 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 Brooklyn, we go hard.
Before we get started, can we nobody asked me to do this. We all turned to a neighbor. Jeneé didn't have a neighbor on the stage, so can we all, in unison, on the count of 3, say, "You are joy and you are love" to Jeneé? 1, 2, 3. You are joy. You are love.
Thank you. Ain't nobody tell you come up here running my stage.
My bad.
This what happened when you get 2 sugar cookies on stage. Devin, let's first start with telling people what the Teachers Lounge is.
So the Teachers Lounge is a nonprofit organization that does work to recruit, revitalize, and retain educators of color throughout the greater Boston area and beyond. Social and professional networking, professional development as direct services to educators of color who choose a profession that they have every reason to run kicking and screaming from. And we learned a long time ago that we were, at best, putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound if we were just creating escapism for educators of color by providing those direct services to them and not actually changing the systems themselves. And so we started to do some policy work. We started to do some training and development for leaders around their equity-centered hiring and retention practices, including the State Department of Education, DESE, amongst others. So we've been in operation since 2018, when we first connected.
Absolutely. When I first met you, the Teachers Lounge operated very much as a place of support and solidarity. It was equal parts kiki and joy, and then there would be some development and pouring into each other and skills building.
Yeah.
Since then, there's been a lot of growth, and I know you will say there's such a long more way to go, and I get that, but I want to take a minute and really talk about or share space for you to just talk your shit about all the accomplishments and how it's grown.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna talk my shit. So we learned back in 2018, it was a kiki, right? So Jabari Petty, shout out to Bari. Bari was my co-founder. We were both school leaders, New York City transplants, both looking to find community socially ourselves, but also looking to build out our network for our schools. So we were looking to hire more folks who look like us in our buildings for the sake of our babies. And everybody kept telling us we just aren't out there. Y'all hear the narrative, ain't no black people in Boston. We knew it wasn't true, but we had to prove it, both to ourselves and to others. And so, fateful day in September 2018, we put out email blast to 100 educators of color, personal connections, 1 degree of separation. We'd have been happy if 30 people showed up to that event in September of 2018. We had 120 show up to the first event. We averaged 70 attendees per month in that first year, 150 in year 2. Pandemic hit, we shifted to virtual programming, averaged about 60. But the thing we kept hearing was like, no matter how dope and necessary of a respite we had created with our programming in direct service of educators of color, folks had to return to toxic work environments on Monday. So we weren't doing enough if we were solely servicing educators of color directly. And so we shifted in year 2 to do some of that policy work. We are right now in partnership with a number of organizations championing a bill called the Educator Diversity Act. A little quick shift for a moment. We live in a liberal state. And this would be one of the first legislations that explicitly talks about the need to diversify the educator workforce. And yet, so we do work not just locally, I serve on a number of coalitions nationally to do some educator diversity work. And you'd be surprised when you cross the Mason-Dixon, like I'm talking explicit racism, there is explicit legislation that prioritizes educator diversity, and yet here, we don't have it. And so it didn't make sense, and one of the things that we sought out in everything that we do, we live by a mantra that says, and we didn't coin this, this is from a South African rights campaign, which says, nothing about us without us is for us. What we noticed is that most of the folks who are seated at these tables don't look like us, don't look like our babies. We know that the teaching profession doesn't look like us and doesn't look like our babies. But how do you make the shift to ensure that those who are making decisions, if we say that we're making decisions on behalf of our babies and of our teachers of color, then why aren't we seated at those tables? And so the thing that we've prioritized from day one in any legislation that we push, champion, or what is, it's not just me. It is us going to our collective. So what started with 100 educators of color is now 2,500 across the state. And anytime we push anything, we go to the people and make sure that we are well represented by the folks in the process.
I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. I'm proud of you, and I appreciate, like you using this platform to uplift these voices and stories, so that we can tell the story. Yes, I'm not from Boston. I do rep because, and I take offense. I take offense to the fact that when folks name that we ain't out here when we are clearly.
Oh, I take deep offense to the idea that we are. It's partly the motivation behind A Beautiful Resistance is to raise the visibility. Like we are a quarter of this city.
There you go.
And if you factor in our Latino brothers and sisters and our Asian siblings, we primarily make up this population.
There you go.
Capital B, Black Boston.
Thank you for that part.
That was my turn talking my shit.
There you go.
But speaking of Blackness, I was lucky in some ways when I think about my education because I did have a lot of Black teachers, and I know a lot of my friends did not. And I had a lot of Black teachers, but I do remember going to my HBCU, Norfolk State, Behold, in my freshman year having a white literature professor who accused me of plagiarism because she could not wrap her head around or fathom that my writing skills were that brilliant.
Yep.
And I had written about Ophelia. So the gag is, it was my homework from my senior high school.
In high school.
So I called that white AP English teacher and had her call the white racist lady. She read her for the filth. But I think when I think back to that, and this one other time in the first grade when a white teacher tried to say that I had made up the word zany, even though it's in the dictionary. Because my dad used to punish me by making me read the dictionary.
Y'all remember dictionary?
And encyclopedias?
That's right. That's how I did my research.
But it's those types of moments that startle me and make me think why it's so necessary to have a teacher's lounge pushing for representation and shifting the policies. What is your earliest memory of academia, and when did you know you were Black?
So, you can't look like me in predominantly Black communities. You can't be this pale, let me just say that, melanated, lack thereof, in predominantly Black communities and not be questioned when you're outside of your home community. You also, I keep this beanie on for several reasons, but you can't be this nappy-headed in white communities and not be questioned about your identities. But I've always been Lenora's baby. It's my paternal grandmother. I've always been Gladys's baby. It's my maternal grandmother. And Blackness was affirmed from youth, from jump. It wasn't until you step into othering communities that you start to get the questions of what are you, et cetera. You're about to turn this into a therapy session, but, and I have family members who don't know this. I didn't learn about my white ancestry until late in life. I was 15 when I learned that my mother was adopted and that my grandmother was the byproduct of white rape. So I have no connections to white ancestry in terms of like my growing up, but it haunted me and folks asking questions about your identity, but within home communities, it was never a question. Like, you are Lenora's baby, you are Gladys's baby, big-headed baby at that. When you step into other communities is when those things happen. And school can sometimes be the other community for so many of us, and particularly when you don't have adults who, with shared identities, who are at the front of these classrooms. So I think my earliest recollection of academia was, my grandmother, rest her soul, she lived to 100 years old. Attendance was everything. Like, I had to go to school. There was no sickness or snow that was going to stop me from going to school. I had perfect attendance through middle school. And just to show you this, she lived till she was 100, so she wasn't even trying to miss no days on her own. But it was in, I would say, elementary school where sort of othering happened. And you come home, and instead of the right conversation around our lineage and our identities, I got affirmations. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but, that's the way God made you. And you just need a little bit of sun, baby. Were the conversations that we had more often than not. But those affirmations, for better or worse, made me step into the world even more confident in my Blackness, in my identities. And so I think often about the work that I'm doing. I know you didn't ask me this part, but had I had the folks in classrooms to affirm my identities more, I think about, and I'm happy where I'm at, but I think of how different my trajectory would have been. And so that becomes became the precipice for the work that I'm doing to ensure that our babies have more of us in their classrooms to affirm those identities.
I mean, you keep doing my job. That was my next
my bad,
question,
my bad.
well, you answered it.
I can say more.
It's that real sugar cookie energy,
I apologize.
Get some sun.
I get it. I need it. Listen, send me on a trip.
Send me on a trip.
There you go.
No, but really, what was the defining moment when you knew that you wanted to work in academia, and then when you and Bari were like, we're going to make Teachers Lounge?
Yep. So this story evolves year over year. There's always a realization that I have, but I was a career changer. So I was designing shoes, living in New York City, living the dream. I was paid to travel. I was paid to shop. I loved saying what I did. I didn't love what I was doing. Now, every adult has to grapple with this at some point in their life. My mama was right. I should have listened to her. I don't like to admit it, but I should have listened to her. If you let her tell it, I was always supposed to do education. Everything that I did outside of work from high school, I was mentoring, I was coaching, I was tutoring, I was working with students. I had an ex-girlfriend who was training to be a teacher. I went back to grad school to get a whole MBA to come out to teach. So everybody told me I was crazy. But I was helping her at the time become a math teacher. And I realized in that, part of mastery is your ability to teach somebody else to do something. And so I was teaching her how to teach math to students, and I was hooked. While I was in grad school, I was getting my MBA. I was taking social entrepreneurship classes, and they were all ed-based. And again, I was hooked. And it was this continuous, why are you fighting this, right? Your mama told you you wasn't listening. Now you got all these signs and you're still not listening. So I came out despite all advice, and I went into teaching. I was back in New York City before I came back here. Taught for a number of years in some leadership roles in schools. And then Bari and I connected on a fateful game night on my living room couch and started to share war stories and started to realize we had similar paths, we had similar desires, and there was still an absence of something related to what we thought could be in the city that we were now calling home. And you'll be hard-pressed to find any educator, particularly educator of color, who doesn't talk about their why as being connected to the presence of or the absence of a prominent figure in their life. For us, it was the absence of. I had so many examples of dope support and individuals outside of school who looked like me. I had very few in the building, and particularly in my classrooms. So we were so desperately trying to seek to change that in our respective schools at the time. But again, we kept being told we're just not out there. It's not worth the investment, the time. You'd be hard-pressed on a Saturday afternoon in Boston, of all places, to have folks pull up to a teacher event. As I like to say, that was my first Usher watch this moment.
And it worked. Melly is in here. Melly and I went to one. We are not educators. And it was packed.
That's right.
We had a time.
There was a time was had. We learned the balance of meeting all of the needs and identities that folks bring to the work. You don't just show up as a journalist. You don't just show up as a teacher. You don't just show up as a principal. And so, we try to incorporate all aspects of affirming folks' identities in those spaces.
And then I want to shift just a little before we wrap up, because time always flies when you're having fun. One of my favorite things, Real P is here, Shamel, who I love very much. He's
all right.
He's great. Not only is he doing Boston's best party, Silk R&B, but he is a recurring DJ. We are so lucky to have him come back again and again for A Beautiful Resistance. But beyond you two being figures in the community, something that I love about both of you is you are amazing fathers and husbands. And I've seen you with your families, and it just gives me so much joy. What does Black love mean to you?
Black love means healing our inner child, pouring unconditionally into collective growth for the sake of our babies, for our future. Black love means planting seeds that we rarely ever get to see harvested, making these moments bigger than yourself, but seeing a future that is possible. And selfless giving, and Black love is a choice. I think we like to often talk about love like love is, attraction, lust are all feelings. Love, real love, Black love is a choice, day in and day out, even when you don't like somebody. Because let me just tell you, we don't always like each other, but I think all of those things are a part of what Black love means to me, my wife, and my babies.
What is the Black history you carry with you?
I'll talk about Lenora. So Mommy Morris, as many would call her on Lefferts Place in Brooklyn. Moved from Walterboro, South Carolina, to Philadelphia, then to Harlem, then to Brooklyn, where she planted her roots. She was everybody's caregiver on the block. I would say probably right, when you talk about earliest visions of academia, it was Lenora first. She joined the Nation of Islam when, after hearing Malcolm speak, rose in the ranks, became a lieutenant before moving to Brooklyn. And then if any of you have an opportunity to see a documentary called The Sun Rises in the East, she was a big part of the 1960s teacher strike that was about, the teachers were not teaching black babies in the same ways that they were teaching white babies. She was a big part of sort of that movement with the African American Teachers Union.
Your history is your present and your future.
All of it. But it's all connected, and it's one of those things, again, we don't, what you are doing right now is important, and why we need to do these in our own households is because we don't always have these conversations, right? It's easier just to post a couple of things on social media, see each other at the family reunion, and just talk about today. But when we go back, I'm not doing anything new. Not a single thing that I'm doing today is new. I'm carrying this work forward. And again, I'm not going to be able to, it's not realistic that I'm going to see it to its end. I'm planting a seed that I won't get to see harvested, but I'm trying to make sure that the work continues rather than starting over every couple of years.
Amen. Before we give it up for Lenore's baby, big-headed, light-skinned baby.
There it is. There it is. You know it.
And we're going to bring him back up later for questions, but what makes your life a beautiful resistance?
My easy answer could be Black fatherhood, the way folks, and doing it in a way that folks would say either doesn't happen, which is not true, or is not supposed to happen, which is also not true. But again, coming back to this idea of pushing ego aside, community-oriented, student-oriented, student-focused, planting seeds that I won't get to see harvested, and being about collective impact for the sake of our babies. I want soul-filling, I want to be the blueprint for what teacher diversity can look like for the sake of all of our babies.
A beautiful resistance indeed.
There it is.
We'll bring Devin back up, but give it up for Lenore baby.
Thank you.
Now, our next guest is the phenomenal, illustrious, devastating diva of Congress, the People's Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley. I knew right away what I was going to pick for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did just turn 50, so this is that golden season. Okay, before I do anything, I need to acknowledge something. Now, I'm usually in Washington in legislative session, Monday through Thursday. I come back on Fridays. I'm away from my family, and Friday night is our date night. But Conan Harris loves him some you. So I don't want y'all to greet me with, I am love. I want y'all to greet me how my man greets me. So everybody say, hey, pretty brown.
Hey, pretty brown.
Okay, now we can go.
Well, no, we're not done yet. First, thank you, boo, thank you for letting me
Yeah, you know how I
sit
feel
with her.
about you.
Thank you. I thank you so
Yeah,
much.
so much love.
For those of you who have come to one of these every couple months, unless she was here last week for our first ever family edition. You know, when there's a birthday, we do it appropriately. So, 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you.
What?
Happy birthday to
What?
ya. Happy birthday. Go, Pretty Brown. Hey, hey.
Thank you, everybody. And
thank
and
you.
Jeneé, thank you. Thank you for being such a righteous steward of your gifts. Thank you for being the visionary that you are. And thank you for creating safe, curated, joyful spaces for us, especially against the backdrop of everything happening in our country right now. I appreciate you. Love you so much.
Thank you so much. I love you too. So I moved to Boston in 2018, just in time to register to vote and be a part of so many actually historic elections for our city that season. How would you say things have changed from when you first became the People's Congresswoman to now, headed into the next round of election season?
Yeah, in the last 5 years?
Yes.
Well, I mean, in some ways I could say everything and nothing has changed. I think we find ourselves truly on the brink of fascism and authoritarianism, emboldened white supremacy, persistent poverty and a racial wealth gap, and increasingly so limitations on access to health care, bans on our books, bans on our bodies. When I was elected to Congress, today I refer to him as Defendant Trump, but when I was elected, he was the occupant of the White House. And I was in the 116th Congress. We were the first Congress to be onboarded in the midst of a government shutdown. So I came in the midst of a government shutdown, and in the 5 years, bore witness to 2 impeachments, survived an insurrection, and now we find ourselves in this moment. So, but the reason why I say everything and nothing has changed is because there are many inequities and injustices during the pandemic and at the height of Black Lives Matter and this so-called racial reckoning that we said coming out of, because everyone said, oh, okay, these things have all been compounded. You know, for some people, this was the first time that a light was being shown on these things. And the pandemic compounded all of those inequities. And it was my hope that coming out of that, there would be a will to not default to an unjust status quo. And that's why I can say that everything has changed, but nothing has changed.
And so much, I don't write as much as I used to because I'm in management now, but the bulk of my work in those first few years at the Globe, so many times I was on the phone with you and your team and writing pieces surrounding the work you were doing, and also just the violent rhetoric around Black women and other women of color in Congress, and everyday Black women as well. Like I have definitely been on the receiving end of the threats. But what is it? I feel like everybody loves to say protect Black women, love Black women, make space for Black women. But what does it really mean to protect a Black woman? What does that look like day to day? Because I feel like one of the reasons I chose Allison's episode is because I feel like a lot of times we say, and not me and you, but as a society, we're going to protect these women. We're going to protect Black women. We listen to them. They're going to save us. And then we get into these positions of power, and you're so often alone and unprotected.
Well, I think we've spoken about this before. I think as Black women, we occupy a very unique dichotomy where we are hyper-visible, certainly as a bald Black Congresswoman I am. But we are hyper-visible, so we are targeted, we are surveyed, we are profiled. So we're hyper-visible in how we show up in the world. And we are also, and on that point, that's why Black girls, right, 6 times the rate of white girls, are pushed out of our school system because they're criminalized simply for being Black girls. Why I introduced my legislation, the In Pushout Act. So to be a Black woman means to be hyper-visible, but also hyper-invisible, where people don't see or legitimize your pain, footnote or completely erase your contributions. And so that's a space that we occupy. We are hyper-visible while also hyper-invisible. So far as what I experience, I mean, you have to understand, I'm currently serving, and I make no complaints about this. I'm asked all the time if I'm growing tired or weary. My response is always the same. You know, I don't have the luxury of apathy or cynicism. I don't. People are depending on me to stand in the gap. But I am serving in this 118th Congress with people who believe in eugenics. I'm across the hall from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who trolls us pretty much every day. When my legislation, the Federal Crown Act, was introduced, Lauren Boebert on the House floor, along with many others, referred to it as the bad hair bill. So I'm in a climate that is anti-Black, anti-woman, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ, anti-worker, anti-democracy. And so what am I doing as a Black woman? I'm doing the things we've always done. In the midst of my own criminalization and oppression, doing the work of liberation. You know, so that's what it means. And I hope that I'm honoring that long line and history and tradition of Black women as table shakers and truth tellers and justice seekers, but also as nurturers.
I'm gonna tell a story now.
Okay.
Mostly because I can't even believe that you never need to hope or wonder. You are more than honoring that legacy and carrying on that
Thank
tradition.
you.
Back in 2018, I went to, or it might have been 2019, but I feel like it was 2018. I went to DC to visit the Congresswoman in her office, so I guess it was 2019. And it was, she was having a day, there was a lot going on, and we didn't get to have the time planned the way we wanted to. And then we ran into one another randomly at a co-working space, and she stopped me and just gave me the biggest hug, and she'd seen a lot of the comments and rhetoric and violence around my work. And even though she was being targeted by Trump himself, she took a minute to whisper a bunch of encouragements in my ear and gave me a squad button that I still have. And she does that all the time, not just with me, but just with a myriad of people across the city, where even when we're in workspaces, she'll stop them and just tell them, what can I do for you? How can I support you? So while she's doing all this incredible, radical, righteous work, she's in facing unimaginable violence, she's always thinking of others. So you never have to wonder.
Thank you, sis. Yeah.
What's your earliest memory of Black girlhood?
For me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, quick digression. So I've never seen a Black statement hoodie that I did not want. I collect them. I have a lot of Black statement hoodies. And I remember being at Black Market, and someone was selling a Black statement, like, affirmation hoodie, and it said, "Carefree Black Girl." And I said, I can't buy that because I don't embody that at all. I've actually never been carefree. I'm joyful. But I don't think I've ever been carefree, including when I was a little girl. I remember sitting atop telephone books while getting my hair pressed, and the beauticians doing what they do, which is to talk about you like you're not there, especially when you're a child. And they were talking amongst each other, and they said, "What is it with this child? Why does she always look so worried?" And so I was about 9, and so one of them finally, and I had I was a voracious reader, I still am, and usually read 3 books at the same time, and each book twice. And so I had my head in my book, and I was half listening, and then finally one of them said, "What are you so worried about?" And I said, "The world." And I am an only child, and was raised in a single-parent household, and my mother maintains that the reason why I was born in the month of February was because I was destined to make Black history. And, so that I have to say, now y'all that have a lot of siblings are like, "Oh, those only children, they get on our nerves." Of course your mama said that to you. But I just say all that to say that I think I was old early. Because there were expectations being placed on me, and because it was both this gift and also this burden that, because it was just my mother and I saw her as a woman more than I saw her as my mom, if that makes sense. Because I was the one comforting her when her heart was broken. I was the one that was proximate to the disappointment she would feel when she would train some white man that was promoted over her. I was the one getting the heating pad when her fibroids felt like they were going to split her in two. And I was the one that had to rush to the hospital when she returned to work prematurely after that radical hysterectomy, because she was worried about not keeping her job. And she collapsed in the street. And I was the one who was a latchkey kid. That's what we called it then. And I was very young, and my mother would tell me to not tell people that I was home alone because she was worried they would take me away from her, because I was probably like 5.
That's what I was about to say. I was a latchkey kid at 5, and my mom also was like, "You better not tell anybody when you get home from school."
She was worried. She was worried, And I would come to that house, make my little fried bologna and mustard sandwich on Wonder Bread, and work it out. But, actually, a quick digression about that. When I don't know where I came up with this, but when I would get into the apartment, I would close the door, lock, double lock, chain, do everything. And then I would bark, and I would go, "Get back, Rufus." Because for some reason, I conceived in my mind that if someone was really watching me, they needed to know I had a serious, pit in this apartment. And my husband said, he said, that was so, smart, very creative.
That is very smart.
But he also said probably the neighbors were like, "What's wrong with that little girl next door? Why is she over there barking like a dog?"
I would come in and put on music because my dad wasn't home, so I could get up in his record collection, and I would just go ham playing all the records, but loud too. I made peanut butter and jelly because
that's still the jam.
They scared me off the oven.
PB&J does not get old. Yeah.
Well, my mom was like, "Don't touch the oven; you gonna set a fire."
Okay.
So
all real things. So I feel like I grew up, very early. So I don't think I ever had that kind of, carefree girlhood thing. But certainly some of my earliest memories are of jumping double dutch. I was not good. So then they would have me turn, and then I was double-handed, And probably the most prominent memory for me is being at my grandfather's storefront church on the south side of Chicago, and standing in front of the congregation with ashy knees, nervously trying to remember my scripture for Resurrection Sunday. And all it was Jesus wept. And the mothers of the church said, that's all right, baby, So those are two that stand out in my mind, yeah.
I'm thinking about how you led with the story of getting your hair done and how we're just next door to Rerooted
Yes.
and the stories we all share around our hair, especially as Black women. Let's talk for a minute about the Crown Act and the way you have been such an ambassador for alopecia, for being your whole self, for celebrating Black womanhood in every way.
Thank you. Well, first, I do want to acknowledge the brilliant creatives behind Crown of Times and Rerooted. Can we just give it up to
Yes,
those Black
please.
creatives? And also, I was remiss I have to acknowledge the house that we're in. Can we give it up to the museum for continuing to be so intentional in their exhibits and in inviting us to spaces like this? Okay, so I have to say this. A lot of people are under the impression that I've been living with alopecia for a very long time. That is untrue. I had shoulder length, very long hair. I had stopped relaxing my hair for about 10 years. The only person that had ever, in that time seen my hair when I would be, in between getting it in a protective hairstyle was my husband. So, I had hair, and I did rock my Black womanhood in many different ways. I had a little Sade ponytail. You couldn't tell me anything when I had that on. I had a little Rihanna bob wig, for a minute. I had weaves, extensions, but when I got Senegalese twists to my waist, when I saw myself in the mirror, I felt I met myself for the first time. It was the first time I felt just complete alignment. But I also wept because we were conditioned so early on to not even know how to do our own hair, just how it grew out of our head. And I sort of mourned that I didn't have that appreciation. But now I could stand, really fully in it. And I lost, all the hair on my head, my face, my body in a 5-week period. I have alopecia totalis. Alopecia, there are several different types of alopecia. There's traction alopecia. I have legislation around that to support our sisters in the military who often get that from the tight protective hairstyles that they wear. There's alopecia areata, which is patches. And then there's alopecia totalis, what I have. And this all happened within the midst of the first impeachment. And, my husband was devastated because he was home, and I texted him a picture. I mean, I would walk and my hair would fall. And so at about 11 o'clock at night, the eve of the first impeachment vote, I sent him a picture of me, and I was just bald. And the crazy thing about it happened on the same day as my mother's heavenly birthday, December 17th. She was a Sag. Shout out to all the Sages. Nobody's like y'all. And I said I would love. And so on my mother's heavenly birthday, I had such a peace about it. Honestly, I had such a peace about it. And maybe it was because I was finally free of it, because I had been in those 5 weeks having to employ all these creative things to try to not showcase that I was, losing, whole swaths of hair. I mean, just every morning being met with it in the bowl of my bathroom, and still having to summon what I needed to go into the world and project confidence. So maybe I just felt finally relieved that it was over, it was done. And I remember getting in the shower, and I felt so liberated, because my whole life I had never been able to get in the shower without tying my hair up, putting on 2 shower caps, sometimes a plastic bag if that's all you had.
I don't know.
And when I got in that shower and that water just hit my scalp, my bald scalp, I don't know, maybe it was its own sort of baptism. I just felt immediate peace and alignment, and this is how I'm meant to show up. But because as a Black woman, everything we do is political, including how we show up in the world. In 5 hours, I was going to have to go and cast this vote and make a floor statement as to why I was casting my vote this way. And my team said, you can't go to the floor, bald like this. And none of them knew what was going on with me, except for my chief. And so they're, stunned when they see me as well. They said, but they'll think you're making a political statement. So here I had experienced this devastating transformation, not of my own choosing, in like a 6-hour period, was trying to stand in it. And I call her my sister cousin. I have a whole bunch of sister cousins: Brittany Packnett Cunningham, Angela Ride, Tiffany Cross, Joy Reid. These are my sister cousins. I went to the chat, and Angela hooked me up with a stylist. And I, for the first time ever, got fit with this lace front wig. And it immediately felt foreign to me because I had gone through such a journey to love my own hair that this felt like a costume. It felt like armor I didn't want to put on, but I had to. So I went, and you can Google it. You can see me on the floor with this very curly wig and sort of an African jacket. And I left the floor, I went to the bathroom, and I wept. And I decided in that moment that I was not going to wear a wig. And so I wanted to say this: Black journalism matters. I called my friends at The Root, not even knowing the journalist that was assigned to me had alopecia. So just like divine alignment. Mm-hmm. And we started to put the pieces together for me to tell this story visually. And so ever since then, I've been standing in this transformation, not of my choosing. I think at first I was so focused on what I was losing because it became such a big part of my identity to have these Senegalese twists. And so many girls would, email me and call me and say what that representation meant to them. Mm-hmm. And I had a T-shirt after I was elected to Congress that said, can a Congresswoman rock braids, yep, a black leather jacket, and a bold red lip? And I said, what now, I was so focused on what I was losing that I didn't realize what I was gaining, which was community and authenticity. And the permission I was creating for myself was creating it for others. And that's why in that Root video, which went viral.
If you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. It's beautiful.
I remember before we literally hit the send button, I said to my staff, what if 30 people watch it? I really had no understanding. We have now received awards from national dermatology associations and things like that because so many people took that video and were then going to dermatologists and saying, is this what I have? Mm-hmm. They didn't even know what to name it, what to call it. And so a number of people got diagnosed from that. But in any event, so in that video I said, I'm not here just to take up space, I'm here to create it too. And so that's what I've been doing. So now the Crown Act, which is to ban race-based hair discrimination, has been passed in a number of states, but still has not been passed federally. If you do a Google search right now of unprofessional hairstyles, most of the images that you will be besieged with are of Black women in everything from locks to afros to braids. This is how you know that we're oppressed, because everything that most can assume as their birthright are things that we have to litigate for, legislate for, or organize for. But these things are birthrights for other people that they can just literally show up in the world exactly as they are and not even think about any of these other things. And so if we're successful in passing this legislation federally, it passed the House, but it was stopped in the Senate. So we'll have to reintroduce it again. And I'm doing everything to ensure we get back into the majority so we can do that. That will mean if you experience discrimination, either you didn't get interviewed for a job or you didn't get promoted for a job, or these are things you can point to, now you have protections, you'll have recourse. The other thing that I did in that vein, and I'll stop here, is that I did introduce the medically durable wigs legislation, because for people who have experienced traumatic hair loss, either from autoimmune diseases or cancer, and again, it's so much more than cosmetic. You experience discrimination, it's psychological, it's a lot of things. So for those that want to wear wigs, they can be very cost prohibitive. Some of them, just to get a custom wig that's medically durable, can cost you about $4,000 or $5,000. So myself and Congressman Jim McGovern have introduced legislation for those wigs to be covered by insurance. Yeah. So I know that was a lot. Okay, I'll be tighter on the next one.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
I know we're a little short on time, but I want to talk about 2 more pieces of legislation. A recurring theme in our conversation, and almost every time you and I speak, is about all of the lies lodged against us, and then kind of the fight to protect the truth. American history taught as it should be, and really protecting our existence. You are a person who always takes space to pull me to the side and say, thanks for making space for joy. And I think about that a lot because it's not just about the joy, it's also about the imagination.
Yes.
And in making space to even imagine what is possible. Because if you can't be in your joy and in your imagination, you can't possibly have the gumption and the audacity to fight for what you haven't seen. So when I think about book bans and all of these ways in which they're retooling American history to fit their supremacist narratives, it's really an attack against the radical imagination. Can you tell the people a little bit about the legislation that you...
Sure. Okay, real quick, because I want you to be able to get other stuff in. All right. So I introduced legislation called the Books Save Lives Act. That's not just a title. I know that to be true. It was true for me as a child experiencing sexual abuse for much of my formative years. When I first read Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, it was the first time I knew I was not alone in the world. So these bans are an assault on intellectual freedom. They are an erasure of the contributions of indigenous people, of AAPI people, of Black folks, of Latinos, of the LGBTQ community, of women. And again, it is no surprise that it's happening in this moment. As I said, we're in the midst of a march towards fascism and authoritarianism. And so I know the path to justice is nonlinear. We are in the algorithm. No gains are guaranteed. You know, they're always undone and you start again. And I introduced this legislation because I don't want y'all to get tricked by some Northeast exceptionalism to think that these harms are not coming here. Because we have had, in the Commonwealth alone, almost 70 book challenges. And throughout the country, we have had 3,300. So these bans are harmful because they embolden white supremacy and hate. And these bans are harmful and risk people's lives because it is painful when you don't see yourself affirmed, your family model, your lived experiences reflected. So my legislation, the Book Saves Lives Act, will ensure a diverse representation of books in our schools. But also, if someone does ban a book, say that it is a violation of federal civil rights law. Because it is a civil right to have access to those books. So I'm doing this work in defense of Black authors, well, all authors, but because it's Black History Month, I just want to lift that up in particular, because many of the books being targeted are Black authors.
Absolutely.
The likes of Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, and many contemporary.
I just saw one where a permission slip was sent out because a student needed permission from their parents to read a book, and the reason was because it was by an African American. Not because the book was about race. It was literally, the reason was book by African American.
Right. So just so y'all understand that any parent can just say, I don't want, So the process of getting the book returned is an exhaustive process with multiple steps. But to get a book pulled, it can happen very quickly.
Very quickly.
It does not require very much at all. And this is it's precedent setting. We've been receiving calls from Broadway and people because now what we're starting to see are challenges to screenplays.
It's
Yeah,
the one-
so-
it's an attack against the imagination.
Yes, an attack against the imagination. Very poetically put.
I mean, the arts is what informs so much of our desire to have more, to be more, to do more. 2020 is when a beautiful resistance was born, and it was in the wake of the lynching of George Floyd. And during that time, I remember so many companies being like, oh, we're gonna do so much for Black people and social justice, so we're gonna give all this money. And people who were even like amplifying the work I do that had never amplified, like national programming, wanting to work with me and wanting to know about more nonprofits in the city. And now here we are 4 years later, and I'm like, where is the money? How do we call those people to account? And you are working to make sure like those promises made are kept. Can you share with the people what you're doing there?
Sure. Quick digression, I want to say my favorite was Water is Resistance.
That was the first one.
Okay, I love that one, and I'll connect that to what I'm about to say in a moment. So I serve on the Financial Services Committee. So under that, we have jurisdiction over everything from housing to homelessness to student debt, which is why I've been a leading voice in that fight and negotiator. Financial services, obviously, consumer protection. And recently, I put out a letter calling on the 5 biggest banks who had made pledges in the work of racial equity to the tune of $32.5 billion. We went through the 5 biggest banks and looked at every pledge they made and totaled it all up. It was $32.5 billion. Now I said, well, I have not felt the impact of $32.5 billion. I need some receipts, ma'am, sir. So we publicly put out this letter asking for a comprehensive audit. And to my surprise, and we gave them a deadline, they did respond. And I have to say, as we went through assessing, disaggregating 200 plus pages of response, that I was encouraged by many of the steps they were taking. But I'm not done, because I think their work is not just about what they're doing externally in lending, and I'm bringing this up because in Water is Resistance, a lot of what you're talking about is Black home ownership and space and belonging. We have a $10 trillion racial wealth gap. In my district, the Mass 7th, from Cambridge to Roxbury, median household income drops by $50,000. That is as the result of decades, centuries of policy violence and divestment. So a $10 trillion racial wealth gap is not just a problem for Black folks. That's a problem for everybody. And everyone needs to have a stakeholder in addressing that. And so the way we do that is holding these financial institutions accountable, because they have contributed to many of these inequities with practices like redlining or discriminating in lending. One of the other things I work on is appraiser bias. If you are fortunate enough to be a Black person and even own a home, by the way, right now, out of all the homeowners in the country, Black folks only 9% of Black folks own homes in the whole country. And because we didn't get the Homestead Act, because we didn't get our 40 acres and a mule, because we didn't get access to the GI Bill, because of redlining, we have been denied a pathway to generational wealth. Now, we've had gains, our income has gone up, but incomes are not wealth.
They are not wealth.
They are not wealth.
They are not wealth.
So for all those reasons, we borrow and default. We borrow at higher rates and default at higher rates on student loans. So all these things are connected. And the appraiser bias piece is, if you're fortunate enough to own a home, the appraisers do not value your home at the accurate value. They will devalue it. So you can't even take equity out of it. So anyway, we're taking these banks to account. I'm conducting oversight, and now I'm looking for them to do internal changes. What does your board look like? Can you eliminate the practice of overdraft fees? and other, reopen bank branches in our community, language access. So that work continues.
Before we close out, because there's never enough time, before we close out, I have to give a shameless plug, not just to the Congresswoman's legislation that will benefit us all, but also to the Boston Globe's Money, Power, and Equality team. Myself and Anika Butler built it. It is led by Chris Hooks, and it is amazing. So please look into that work.
Yes,
It's
please do
dedicated
that.
to closing the racial wealth gap. I'm always just so happy to be in community and conversation with you. I have at least 10 more questions, but we must go. So,
Okay.
what makes your life a beautiful resistance?
Yeah, I guess my Black love. My Black love, my Black joy. And that joy, it really is the little things. I have this little scar on my hand, and I got it just in the last 3 months. And it's I was making breakfast for my family. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's one of my favorite moments of joy, to pour into them in that way, because my love language is acts of service. And I make a mean shrimp and grits. And so I don't know what our grandmothers did, how they did not get marked up like this, but this is from a grit pop. But every time I see it, it gives me joy, because it takes me back to that thing that I love doing the most for my family, which is to break bread with them and to have that quality time.
Well, tell your husband I said thank you for letting me disrupt date night
I will.
and having this date with all of us.
Thank you.
I don't want your money. I want you. And so, I want that mic.
Okay, hold on. Let me set my stuff down. Let me get it together. Okay. All right.
Thank you all. Election season is coming. Get your civic life together.
Yes, voting is self-care.
Voting is self-care, and policy is her love language. Let's thank the Congresswoman and bring Devin back up. Love you. Thank you.
Sorry you didn't get to do any audience questions.
I don't know. This is fine. Devin. Thank you, Sophia. How y'all feeling? Listen, we just a couple minutes away from the key portion of this evening. There's gonna be drinks, Real P about to be spinning. It's gonna be a good time.
The lights came on.
Yeah, because we're gonna do we got just a few moments for questions. You did have a couple of audience questions submitted, and if you all have questions, there's mics here. From Naisha Deed, what are your thoughts on the METCO program? What impacts, both positive and negative, do you think it has on racial identity and affirmation of Black and brown students? And do you think it should be revamped or we should keep it?
All of that.
All of that.
It's bad enough I have to follow my Congresswoman, but now and I love Naisha.
We all love Naisha.
We all do. It is flawed. You can't take Black and brown babies out of our communities, no matter how high quality we think the education is in other spaces, and solely plop us into othering communities and think that we are going to get the same education as those who are of that community. And so we get pulled in often at the Teachers Lounge to support METCO schools in terms of their equity and inclusion work, and it is hard to do. What we've learned over the years in doing this work is that in addition to the lived experiences in K through 12 systems that we have as students of color who then grow up to become educators of color, those shared identities, shared experiences that you cannot teach. The other thing that we've yet to see in education is the ability to coach folks in their belief in the abilities of our babies. And so in these predominantly white schools and predominantly white staff, it's a predominantly white profession. There's work that needs to be done on unpacking and unlearning that needs to happen across the board, even in BPS, right? That's not a knock. I'm just naming it's work that needs to be done. And it's that much harder to do when you go out to these suburban, predominantly white schools. And so if there's not intention set by leadership around the work that folks are doing and the ways in which we are welcoming students into those communities and prioritizing their well-being in the process, then it will continue to be flawed.
Thank you. We have time for 2 audience questions, so you can come to that mic or that mic. And while you're doing that, we have a really good question from a student at BU who is majoring in education. Is the Teachers Lounge going to do any work reaching out to students who are going to be future educators because they are facing similar toxic situations in their undergrad programs?
Yes. So we launched 2 years ago something called the CLOC Fellowship, Classroom Leaders of Color Fellowship. The idea behind this is that oftentimes, so educators of color are leaving the profession at a rate 24% greater than our white counterparts, but we're seeing a higher uptick in folks leaving the profession before year 4, something we call the year 4 fall off. Most teacher prep programs, one, don't have us leading them, so we are not getting coached and developed in those programs by folks who look like us. But also, most schools don't do induction well. So the coaching and mentoring that you're supposed to get in those first 2 years of teaching is not done by us, is not done well, and I would say like what we call the hidden curriculum is not taught to us. How to navigate predominantly white spaces, how we show up, how we bear what's called the invisible tax, I would argue is no longer invisible, right? That care and responsibility that we feel for babies who look like us that many of our white counterparts may not feel when they step into the work, and that care. So it's a long-winded way to just name to this person. We have this fellowship that is supposed to build out the pipeline and strengthen sustainability for our early career. theteacherslounge.ma.org is the website, and there you can find about our CLOC Fellowship. But we are coming to work with teacher prep programs. We're building some relationships with BU, with UMass Boston, and other teacher prep programs to try to make sure that we have created the space that they can step into as soon as they hit the ground running teaching, to be welcomed into community, even if their school buildings don't look like our community yet.
Hi, I'm Vivian Sang. I live in Malden, and this is a question and a comment. I am part of a coalition for anti-racism and equity in education.
Yes.
We're sponsoring a bill, the state legislature, that calls for inclusive education, inclusive curriculum. It calls for ethnic studies, essentially,
Yes.
in the K through 12 curriculum.
Yes.
And it would fill the holes that you've so eloquently pointed out about Medco and what Medco cannot accomplish. And it
Yeah.
would fill the holes that the Congresswoman is trying to fill in terms of not only protecting the books that are on the shelves today, but to say more. We need the history of Black people, the history of AAPI, the history of Indigenous people.
Yes.
From kindergarten onward, not in events, places.
Absolutely. How can we answer your question?
High school, and this is our second year in the state legislature. We did not get out of committee last year.
Yeah.
The chances are not that bright this year.
Yeah.
And my question is, how can we connect with you?
Yeah.
Within our coalition, we have a thing that we call Brave Space for Educators, and we've the same idea. We're
Yeah.
in the infancy stage of gathering people together, people of color who are educators, to give them
Great.
support and to ask for their help in our curriculum development. How can we, have more visibility through the Boston Globe for this legislation? Because it's a real, uphill battle, because the Committee on Education they say things like, we don't believe in curriculum mandates.
That's right.
Okay. I would encourage you to send a press release to The Great Divide, who does amazing work
Okay,
on
okay.
academic inequity and justice, and then reach out to the Teachers Lounge. Drop the website one more time.
www.theteachersloungema.org.
And for anybody who wants to talk with me afterwards, come look for me. We really need all the help we can get.
Thank you.
And it will all be downstairs together, about to kiki and network. Are there any more questions before we wrap this up? No? Can we say 1, 2, 3? You are a beautiful resistance. 1, 2,